So the story with Fantasia is there is no story. Instead, what it is there's 8 different segments played over with 8 different pieces of music. So the first bit of music is Toccata and Fugue in D minor by Bach. The second is Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker Suite. The third is The Sorcerer's Apprentice by Dukas. The fourth is The Rite of Spring by Stravinsky. The fifth is the Pastoral Symphony by Beethoven. The sixth is The Dance of the Hours by Ponchielli. The fifth is Night on Bald Mountain by Morsowski. And the eighth is Ave Maria by Schubert. So in terms of the plot for this, basically there is no plot, but we're going to run through it anyway. So in terms of the different segments, so first of all, what you have is a kind of live action orchestra who is conducted by Stokowski. We'll talk about him a little bit later. And on screen, it's pretty much just a bunch of different shapes and patterns and cloud formations over Bach's music. Then with Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker Suite, you have basically the changing of seasons, and you have fairies, you have mushrooms, you have fish, and you have leaves, all doing different dances. Next, you have The Sorcerer's Apprentice with Dukas' music, and this is with Mickey Mouse, and he basically playing The Sorcerer's Apprentice. So this is based on Goethe's poem called Der Zauberling. I don't know how to pronounce German, apologies, but yeah, this is a poem from 1797. So within this, what you see is Mickey Mouse, and when the sorcerer has gone to bed, he ends up taking the sorcerer's hat, and he turns one of the broomsticks into life. However, this kind of backfires and ends up being loads of broomsticks, and there's just a complete mess. But yeah, the sorcerer comes in the end and fixes everything. And then the next bit with Stravinsky, it's basically kind of very primordial kind of thing. There's magma, there's dinosaurs. It's very much kind of like Land Before Time kind of vibes. If you've ever seen that film, definitely check it out if you haven't. And then the next bit you have is with Beethoven, right? So this is on screen, you see a bunch of Greek centaurs, you see the Greek god of wine called Bacchus, and then you see Zeus throwing lightning bolts down at people. Next, you see Ponchielli, and on screen there's a bunch of ostriches, there's hippos, there's elephants, and there's alligators, and they're all basically doing kind of like different ballet dances with each other. Then you have Morsowski, and this is Chernobog. So Chernobog is a Slavic pagan god, and this is basically the devil. So he's up on Bald Mountain, and what he's doing is he's summoning evil spirits, and he's calling restless souls up to pretty much the underworld. And then finally you have Schubert's Ave Maria, and this is where there's an Angelus bell, and it drives away the evil spirits, and it calls the restless souls back to their resting place, and then this is how the film ends. So that's the plot of Fantasia, but now we're going to be looking at the story of the creator and also the story of the studio, because this section here we're going to kind of blend it together because because there's not much of a storyline, it's quite difficult to have the things separate as we would with our normal films. But anyway, so that's what we're doing now. So Walt Disney had the idea of having Mickey Mouse in one of his silly symphonies. So this is kind of what Walt Disney used to do like before he made feature-length films, these little like short cartoons. And he was really inspired by the poem, as we've said, I'm not going to try and pronounce it again, but it's The Sorcerer's Apprentice. And he wanted that to be done over the music of Dukas. So Walt decided to get 2 writers together to make a plan for this. And the 2 writers' names were Dick Humer and Joe Grant, right? So they came together and they basically laid out a plan for this. And they worked very closely with Stokowski. Now, who's Stokowski? Stokowski was an Englishman of Polish origin, and from 1912 to 1940, he had been the conductor for the Philadelphia Philharmonic Orchestra. And so Walt Disney happened to bump into him and end up speaking to Stokowski about this, because what Walt wanted is he wanted a conductor who had a lot of prestige in order to give the film a lot of prestige. So upon hearing the idea of it, Stokowski was blown away, and he was like, you know what, I'll do it for free. In the end, he didn't end up doing it for free, but we'll kind of cover that a little bit later. But yeah, at least the initial intentions were there. So Stokowski had complete control over the musical direction of the film, and on the night of the 19th of January 1938, they did a 3-hour long concert, and this basically was just for The Sorcerer's Apprentice. However, The problem with all this was that everything cost a lot of money. And what Walt Disney kind of decided after a while was actually to make any money back from this, it can't just be The Sorcerer's Apprentice. We're going to have to make a feature-length film of this, and therefore we're going to need other musical pieces and we're going to need other stories over that music. So this is how the idea for Fantasia came about. However, originally it wasn't called Fantasia. It was originally called the concert feature. And the name Fantasia ended up being picked out of a list of 1,800 different title names. So they all sat down, thought of different title names, a list of 1,800, and they picked Fantasia in the end. So I personally think it's a fantastic idea that they went with the idea of Fantasia, because it just sings. It's just mwah. And anyway, but what Walt Disney did in this film, which was so groundbreaking, is he set up his own stereophonic sound recording system, right? Now, I don't know what that is, you don't know what that is, but the name of it was Fantasound. And basically the idea for it was having a better recording system. Yeah, that's all you need to know really, was that it recorded sound better than the previous systems that they had, because they wanted the audience to be able to really enjoy it. And so Fantasound was a very good endeavor, but it was also a very expensive one. As a matter of fact, 1/5 of the budget for Fantasia went on this Fantasound. So it kind of gives you an idea of just how important sound was for Disney with this. So in the end, Stokowski, although he had said he would do it for free, he ended up being paid $80,000 for it, plus royalties. And they got Deems Taylor, who was a famous radio host, to basically be the host for the film. So in between each segment, you have him kind of saying, oh, this is what's happened, this is what's going to happen, etc. So that's what you're kind of seeing on screen. And then on September the 29th, 1938, they end up doing basically a kind of rough show, right, kind of like, so they had an audience there and they just kind of showed them what it would kind of look like, and the audience was really stunned. But this is 1938 and they were working on Pinocchio, they were working on Bambi, and so Walt Disney kind of decided, you know what, it's a great idea and stuff, but we're going to shelve the idea for now just because we need to prioritize other things. So all of this kind of summarizes the story of the creator and the story of the studio. So now we're going to be looking at the themes and the history. Now, there aren't really many themes for this, right? Because obviously there's not really a coherent kind of storyline, there's no kind of coherent plot. But what Walt Disney wanted to do with this was he wanted to expose classical music to the masses, right? Now, if you think about it, in the 1940s, most people, radio was a relatively new thing. If you wanted to go to see classical music, it was very expensive, and pretty much just the elites went to go and enjoy it. And so this meant that a lot of people were not exposed to what classical music sounded like, and so they were missing out on some of the joys of it. And what Walt Disney wanted to do with this film was he wanted to make it accessible and enjoyable for everyone. And that was actually one of the things that he kind of said. He said that even someone like himself used to walk out of things like this, right? But with the animations on screen, with all this great artwork, that's what he wanted. He wanted people to go in and see what they're hearing as such, right? So that was basically the aim of it. And talk about the history of it.